Call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 62 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. The meeting has taken place, of course, in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of June 23rd, 2022. Before we proceed, I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognise you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English or French. For those in the room, of course, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Please address all comments through the chair. Screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. Finally, a reminder to all that the use of a House-approved headset is mandatory for remote participation in parliamentary proceedings. In accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connection tests for witnesses, I am informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on January 18, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of the ecosystem impacts and the management of pinniped populations. I would like to welcome our first panel of witnesses. As an individual here in person, of course, we have Morley Knight, former Assistant Deputy Minister of Fisheries Policies, Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Representing the Collectif Manger Notre Saint Laurent, and if I got that wrong or mispronounced it, I apologise. Melanie Lemaire, Associate Professor, Université Laval, by video conference. And Colombe Saint-Pierre, Chef Owner Restaurant Chez Saint-Pierre, by video conference. And representing Mi'kmaq Commercial Fisheries Incorporated, we have Mr. Bill Penny, Business Developer. Thank you for taking the time to appear today. You will each have up to 5 minutes for your opening statement, and I will invite Mr. Knight to start off, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. In my opening remarks today, I'm going to talk about my experiences with harp and hood seals as well as grey seals. I'd start off by thanking you for the opportunity to appear before your committee again. And as I said, I will talk about my direct experiences, particularly with harp seals and grey seals, as well as the other species. In 1982, in my first year with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, I was at the front off the northeast coast of Newfoundland and Labrador. I was there at the tail end of the season for the large vessel hunt for vessels from Canada and Norway, and at the start of the activities for the less than 65-foot vessels who are harvesting seals about 100 miles east of St. Anthony. That was the last year of harvesting of white coats, and in the following years, markets and harvest levels declined dramatically to around 50,000 animals a year. During that same time, seal populations expanded to 5 times what they were before, and groundfish stocks collapsed across eastern Canada. For years prior to and including 1982, there was a quota of 186,000 harp seals, and the herd was stable at that time at approximately 2 million animals. 35 years later, in 2017, I had the opportunity to visit Sable Island, where grey seals were congregated for their annual pupping cycle. There were thousands of these huge animals and pups on the island. Seeing them there in such huge numbers was an eye-opening experience. For centuries, fish and seals were harvested with the number of seals at levels where they were not having an impact on fish species like they are today. After 1982, markets and harvest levels dropped. About the same time, the bounty on grey seals ended. Over the following years, the number of seals increased about 5-fold. I believe seals were a key factor in the collapse of groundfish stocks and remain to be a key factor in preventing cod recovery, as well as being major predators on lobster, crab, salmon, herring, etc. If you add up all of the seals in eastern Canada and the Davis Strait, I believe there are about 9 million seals, including the harps, hoods, greys, and other species like harbour, ringed, and bearded seals. Based on an estimated consumption of 1.4 ton of fish per year for harp seals, and as much as 2 tons per year for the larger animals like hooded, grey, and bearded seals, they would consume around 13 million tons of fish annually. In this same area, in the same ecosystem, fisheries in Greenland and Canada, and from the Scotian Shelf to the Davis Strait, and foreign fisheries on the Grand Banks and Flemish Cap. When you add it all up, the removal from all fisheries is somewhere in the range of 500,000 to 600,000 tons. The consumption by seals is more than 20 times the total of all our commercial fisheries. Based on my experience and observations, and after talking to thousands of fish harvesters, DFO employees including fishery officers, scientists, and fisheries managers, and others from all over eastern Canada, I believe seals are consuming a huge amount of commercial species of fish, including crab, lobster, salmon, cod, turbot, as well as important prey species like herring and capelin. Unless some action is taken to mitigate the impact of seals, there is no way to effectively manage important fish species using the precautionary approach. The seals would continue to eat them before they get to the level where they can be fished commercially. Seals are everywhere in the ecosystem and eating whatever they can find, whether it is the belly of a codfish or a crab. I have reviewed the recent testimony of MP Cormier about the seals visible from his house in Baie de Chaleur. I can also see them from my house in northeast Newfoundland. They are there to feed. They can be found in every bay and inlet and cove all around our coast. Recently, a seal was spotted in the Exploits River near the community of Grand Falls, Windsor, which is about 20 miles inland. It was probably eating salmon that were returning to the ocean. Seals need to be effectively managed as part of an effective ecosystem-based approach to fisheries management, and the first step in that is to have a clear understanding of how much of each species of fish that seals are eating and what is the impact on each stock of fish. There are many things that government can do to create the conditions for successful management and utilization of seal stocks. These include coordination, infrastructure, research and development, marketing and trade support, and vessel insurance, just to name a few. In conclusion, I have two recommendations for you to consider putting to DFO. One, study the issue of seal consumption and determine how much of each species of fish that each species of seal is consuming annually. Two, implement an ecosystem-based approach management strategies that include reducing the impact of predation by seals on key commercial and food chain species. Thank you for the opportunity to present to your committee today, and I'll try to answer your questions when we get to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. We'll now go to Ms. St. Pierre and Ms. Lemaire. It's my understanding you're doing a joint statement, so I don't know who's starting or who's finishing, or if it's just one of you speaking. When you're ready, 5 minutes or less.
Bonjour.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Our collectif Manger Notre Saint-Laurent, which essentially eating the bounty of the St. Lawrence, co-founded in 2018, brings together scientists from many backgrounds to promote the known and lesser-known edible species. I'm a researcher at the Environmental and Indigenous Health at Laval, and my projects aim to promote traditional and local food while avoiding environmental pollution. We're here today to present you with the most significant facts in favor of increasing the presence of all seal products on markets in Quebec and elsewhere in the country. Our main argument is that the diversification of resources from the St. Lawrence have several benefits: effect on the environment, public health, gastronomy, and the economy. Here are some of our findings. Quebec fisheries are based on 3 species: lobster, snow crab, and northern shrimp. The increased commercialization of seal products on the market contributes to the diversification of the fisheries economy and increased resilience to impacts of climate change and the vagaries of international markets. One of our studies shows that gray seals are exceptionally rich in iron and other nutrients. The meat is lean, less contaminated than bluefin tuna and other species, and the seal fat very rich in omega-3. It's possible to consume seal products in a responsible, well-informed, and safe manner by integrating them into diversified diets based on several species from that same source. Another of our studies show public health actors perceive that seal hunt is sustainable, socially acceptable, and has an important role in the economic development of coastal communities. They want to have the means to promote the seal among the most disadvantaged families. In the Madeline Islands, seals have always played and continue to play a central role in the culture, food, and local economy. The seal hunt, seal products are a source of local pride. Have you ever tried the croque-signol? These are fritters fried in seal oil. Or perhaps a seal burger or seal tataki. You'll find these dishes on the island and increasingly in various restaurants in the east. I'll give the floor now to my colleague, Colombe. Hello, everyone. It's a great honor for me to be here with you today. I'm the chef owner of Chez Saint-Pierre Restaurant and Cantine Côtière. But today I'm here acting as a spokesperson for the collective Manger Notre Saint-Laurent. For those who know me a bit, I've been for the last 20 years fighting for food self-sufficiency, an issue which is at the heart of our concerns during the pandemic in particular. We thought that we became a little bit more vulnerable over the years. So improving access to greater diversity of products from the St. Lawrence on our plates is promising for the future of the coastal communities and for the health of our culinary culture. The demand for our St. Lawrence products is increasingly growing both at home and abroad. Seal products are part of this trend and offer an unprecedented opportunity. Right now, the independent restaurant industry, of which I'm a part, has enormous power to raise awareness of these little-known species of the St. Lawrence and to counter misinformation. The restaurants are a powerful vehicle for influencing food trends and habits in the country, and seal is part of that. Internationally, we've heard often enough that we have a great reputation and we have the power to contribute to a positive perception of Canadian seal products with, of course, the support of our governments. Unfortunately, seal products are not available in sufficient commercial quantities to meet the current and growing demand, particularly outside the Madeline Islands. So I am going to quote you, which I often use to set all my values in this field. Tell me what you eat, I'll tell you who you are. That's quoting Briand Savarin, The Physiology of Taste. So, the seal is part of our territory. It's the link with the history of the inhabitants of this country and must be maintained and supported. We want our gastronomy to be based on a diversity of resources for greater resilience of and for our establishments, but also because of the environment and communities, and seals are central to that. So we want to present these notions for you. Our collective is there. We're there to help you provide information if you need to make enlightened decisions, which is absolutely essential to wise decisions. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
We'll now go to Mr. Penny for 5 minutes or less, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and the members of the committee for inviting me here today. My name is Bill Penny, and I'm the lead at Bill Penny Sales and Marketing Consulting. I am the chair of the Seals and Sealing Network, and I have been working with Mi'kmaq Commercial Fisheries on their seal product file for almost 3 years. I'm not a scientist or a sealer or a processor. I'm not an expert in any of those areas. However, I have over 25 years of international sales and marketing experience. I am here today representing Mi'kmaq Commercial Fisheries. MCF is an independent arm's-length Indigenous company owned by Halibut First Nation. Halibut First Nation is one of the largest First Nation bands in Canada, with 24,000 members spread throughout 67 traditional Newfoundland Mi'kmaq communities. Mi'kmaq Commercial Fisheries manages all fisheries activities on behalf of Halibut First Nation. I want to also clarify that I am not a member of Halibut First Nation, nor am I Indigenous. Since I have started working with NCF, I have learned that the hunting, consumption, and diversified usage of seals is interwoven into the fabric of Indigenous peoples' traditions and culture. Mi'kmaq Commercial Fisheries seeks to engage locally, nationally, and internationally to advocate for the humane harvesting, processing, marketing, and use of seal products. Just 2.5 years ago, we launched an Indigenous brand of seal oil capsules for human consumption called Waspu oil. Waspu is the Mi'kmaq word for seal. Waspu oil is currently being sold in retail stores across Canada and through our website, www.waspu.ca. Our next product, Waspu Oil for Pets, will be launching in the next few weeks, having just received approval from Health Canada as a certified veterinary health product. Additionally, MCF promotes the full utilization of seal and has been actively engaging with potential customers for seal meat products in Japan, the Philippines, and China. In addition to the encapsulated oil, I have been working with customers in Japan to supply bulk liquid seal oil. It's important to understand that the marketing challenge for seal products is not a lack of customers, but rather the lack of access to these customers. In efforts to gain market access, I've been working with Global Affairs and the Trade Commission offices in Taiwan and other countries to open previously closed markets to Indigenous branded seal products. We have also been actively engaged with the CFIA and the Trade Commissioner's office in China to identify the roadblocks for exporting to the Chinese market. We do currently have a customer that sells private label seal oil capsules through their cross-border e-commerce site. As someone who's relatively new to this industry, will here, and as someone whose career has always focused on figuring out how people make decisions, I have learned that not unlike the fur industry, oil and gas, and our energy sector, the seal industry is directly affected by public opinion. Specific to seals, the public's view on the global stage has been shaped by an onslaught of celebrity reactions to seal industry as it existed over 30 years ago. In fact, government policy around the management and regulation of seal population is still being shaped by public perceptions that are created by activists and have no connection to truth, facts, or science. The fact remains that the seal population we are discussing here today are not endangered, and the harvest itself is humane, sustainable, and not just good for Canadians, but good for the world. The current offering from Canadian seal harvests is diverse, innovative. Omega-3 rich seal oil supplements for health is good for everyone from children to seniors. Seal meat is being sold in gourmet restaurants and used as high-end feed, treats, and supplements for pets. And the sustainable, natural, warm, waterproof seal skin is used for garments and accessories. Full utilization shows respect and will maximize value for all levels of the value chain. My ask from this committee and the government is threefold. Firstly, financial support for marketing efforts both domestically and globally. In 2006, the seal industry generated over $30 million in revenue. Supporting our marketing and sales programs will have a positive impact on the Canadian economy. And to focus on facts, most Canadians do not know the facts about the seal, but can repeat the misinformation and propaganda produced by organizations that use the seal industry for its fundraising efforts. Secondly, support for market access. Expand the Indigenous Peoples Economic and Trade Cooperation Arrangement that includes Canada, Taiwan, Australia, and New Zealand to include other countries. Supporting Indigenous exports is important for reconciliation. There cannot be reconciliation without economic reconciliation. And thirdly, finally, commitment to science. Our oceans generate over $30 billion to the Canadian economy. Annual audits show Canadian fish stocks continue to decline. With fish populations decreasing, why would we want to know what is happening? I know one stock that's not declining, seals. And this should also include the Social Science Recommendation 5 of the Atlantic Seal Science Task Team. The report reads, DFO should establish and permanently fund a social science research unit to complement the natural science research. Thank you, and I look forward to any questions later.
Thank you for that. We'll now get to our questions, and we'll go first to Mr. Small for 6 minutes or less. I know he's on video conference there looking at us, and I would remind members, try and identify who your question is for, so as you make better use of your time. So, Mr. Small, for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to Mr. Knight. Mr. Knight, what's the number one impediment based on your vast experience in fisheries management to the establishment of a viable pinniped harvest?
Very clearly, the number one impediment is the lack of an effective market for the product.
So over the years, Mr. Knight, what steps have been taken since 1982 to make the harvest more humane and more socially acceptable?
So that's a very good question. Since 1982, there's been all kinds of steps that have been put in place to counter the accusations of animal rights groups and to make sure that the hunt is conducted in a very humane way and that animals are harvested in a professional manner that causes them the minimal suffering. These include requirements, for example, to have certain types of firearms, and many types of firearms have been banned because they wouldn't make an effective immediate killing, and they might result in animals being wounded and getting away in a wounded state. There's been the ban of the killing of white coats. There's been measures around the humane killing that have included making sure the animal is dead before any skinning or processing of it is occurring, and that includes making sure the skull is crushed so that there is no life left, and other measures such as training for individuals engaged in the harvest. On top of that, there's been significant amount of reaction and mitigative action taken by the sealing industry to make sure that only professional sealers are engaged, and a significant amount of activity engaged in by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to make sure that the seal harvest is effectively monitored, and that when there is harvesting activity, then it is conducted in a humane manner.
So, Mr. Knight, again, have we been successful in our attempts to modernize, to make the industry more socially acceptable? What's been the success? Can you measure that success?
Well, it's difficult to measure the success because we've had veterinarians assess the measures that are in place, and including a veterinarian from the University of PEI was involved for many years in the activities to ensure that seals were being harvested in the most humane manner possible. So I think that the measures that are in place now meet a very high standard, and I would consider that success. At the same time, in terms of public opinion, I don't think we've made much of any progress in terms of making sure that the world understands that seals are being harvested in a humane manner and in a completely comparable manner to harvests of other animals in processing facilities for farm animals, for example.
So the information campaign or misinformation campaign, whichever way you want to put it, by activists and NGOs, we can say it's been quite successful. What needs to be done to address the approach that's being taken by activists and NGOs towards the seal hunt?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer. I've read some of the testimony you've had from other witnesses, and I think some good ideas have been put forth, and we've heard some ideas today about marketing, and I've expressed it myself that we need to demonstrate that the harvest is conducted in a humane manner and that it is a sustainable harvest, because that message is not getting through to people, in my opinion. So I think, the governments in Canada, and I say governments collectively, that includes federal and provincial governments, need to work together to have an information campaign to illustrate and continually demonstrate that the seal hunt, the harvest, is a humane activity, that it is a sustainable activity, that we have the science to show that the herds are being managed in a sustainable manner. But at the same time, I think a crucial part of that is we need to demonstrate to the world the impact that seals are having on our ecosystems and on our fish stocks. And I think without that piece of information to illustrate that we have to do something, we have no choice other than to manage effectively using an ecosystem-based approach to fisheries management, we have no choice but to manage the seal populations.
Mr. Chair, how's my time? Pardon?
28 seconds, 23 now.
So, I heard you, Mr. Knight. You mentioned the issue of vessel insurance and the high insurance. Well, the deductibles are up to $100,000, prohibiting a lot of harvesters from taking part in the hunt. That's what I've heard from stakeholders. What do you think the solution to that would be to help more participation in the hunt?
Okay, I'm going to have to interject here, Mr. Small, because your time has gone over, and hopefully Mr. Knight can provide that answer along the way or provide it to the committee in writing. We'll now go to Mr. Cormier for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here, Mr. Knight. Yes, of course, like I said, many seal in front of my house that I've never seen before. I think, for myself, we need to do something about the seal population. In your time when you were ADM, with the discussion that you have with other ADM at Fisheries and Ocean or DM, or was there any will of solving the problem during your discussion? And what was the cause of not doing nothing for so many years? Or the reason, I should say.
Thank you for the question. Very good question. And in my time in DFO, there was a lot of discussion. At various times, there was energy and a real interest in finding solutions. But I guess fatigue sets in and people lose interest because it seems to be an insurmountable problem. So I think there was interest, but there needs to be sustained interest and collaboration by all levels of government and a game plan that's going to work, taking steps in the right direction that are going to build to a successful outcome.
Okay. So when we talk to Fisheries Association, a lot of them also want us to act very quickly. Like you said, like seals are eating many species, like maybe some crab and lobster, also some mackerel and herring. But we always talking about the impact also that could have on our markets, our exporting market. How can we go past that? You know, if I'm a fisherman right now, am I prepared to put everything on the table and say, oh yes, well, we have to go with a seal hunt, seal harvest, and lower this population as low as we can so it doesn't have an impact. But at the same time, what will be the reaction of other countries? And what will be, how can we surpass that? How can we make sure that other country or environmental group, understand that there's a real problem here, and we're not doing this just for fun. We're doing this because there's a real problem with the ecosystem of other species.
So that's a very good question. And if there was an easy answer to it, we would have found it 30 years ago, when this was recognized as a real problem back as far as 1990, or in the following 10 years or so. I believe there are various things that we can do, and I think the first thing we have to do is have information to present to the world about the impact that seals are having on our fish stocks. We have to present the compelling case that we have no choice but to manage the seal herds in an effective manner. Secondly, we have to have an information campaign that demonstrates that our harvest is conducted in a humane manner. And thirdly, we need to use opportunities. For example, I believe there's an opportunity for indigenous organizations and companies to market seals into the European market. That needs some coordination. It may need some government support from the trade side. It may need some government support from the funding side. But I think that's an opportunity that we're missing, the opportunity to have indigenous companies and individuals participate in the harvest and market it as an indigenous, because there is an exemption to the EU ban, for example, and I think they could effectively market their products in Europe.
So one of the officials that we had on the panel a couple of weeks ago said that their mandate is to keep the seal population healthy. An official from the FO said that. What do you think of that?
I understand that answer. DFO has the mandate for conservation of fish and marine mammals, fish, shellfish, and marine mammals. But healthy is a subjective term. If we're talking about the crab stocks, I think we want them at the highest possible level so we can maximize the return. We also, the other mantra of DFO today is ecosystem-based fisheries management. And we cannot have an ecosystem-based fisheries management if we have top predators in the ecosystem eating potentially up to 13 million tons of fish. So I think they have a mandate to keep the various species of seal at a healthy level, but not at a level that's causing us very serious negative impact on other stocks.
What is our option here that we have when it comes to lowering the seal population? If we do nothing, I think we all know around this table that it will damage other species, right? So I guess what will be your recommendation if you have one to give us? Like what we've been talking about this issue for so many years. It seems like it's never going to be solved. I'm sorry to say that, but what is your recommendation? How do we solve this problem? Yes, the Canadian market will be probably something that we can look at, and we are looking at, but will it be enough to lower the seal population so that it doesn't have any impact on other species?
I believe it's an opportunity that we're missing, but I don't believe in and of itself it'll help us solve the problem. It'll help reduce the numbers if we market seal products in Canada effectively, but I would say this. The challenges of marketing seal products in Canada are nearly as great as they are in the rest of the world. We have to convince Canadians first, and then perhaps we can convince the rest of the world. In my view, with the exception possibly of Quebec, the social acceptance of seal products or the investments in trying to market in an effective manner seal as food, and that includes my home province. Very few people consume seal anymore. So I think we have to start at home, but I think the same information can be used to help convince the world.
Thank you, Mr. Cormier. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm very pleased to see our witnesses here this afternoon, and as you are all very knowledgeable, particularly our friends from Quebec, salutations from the head of the bloc, who of course is actively involved. I'm happy to meet you for the first time, but it's not the first time I hear about you, Madame Saint-Pierre and her colleague. I used to be also a chef owner, and I realize how difficult it is to open up a shop which was strictly cod fillets. And I almost fell over backwards when I heard there's cod from Russia. So I'm glad to hear your enthusiasm about, benefiting from the bounty of the St. Lawrence. What do you attribute to the absence of enough supply to meet the demand in your area? Well, for many of our various products, for example, lobster and crab and shrimp, it's fairly difficult to have access to these resources, and particularly the seal. If we talk about crab or snow crab or lobster, we do catch a lot of these species, but we export most of that production or that harvest. So our purpose to optimize the resources of the St. Lawrence, we should arrive at a situation of food sufficiency or autonomy, if you wish. It's a privileged position for Canadians, but because we've seen the dangers of depending on foreign imports or supply chain disruptions. There are quite a few challenges in accessing the product. If we talk about seal, for example, we have to expand the harvest, if you will. Well, do you think it would be training of new harvesters or recreational harvesting? Perhaps we might make some gains in earning back a part of the market that way. Well, yes, you're right. If we're talking about seals, we have to overcome popular prejudices against this particular product. And perhaps with a new generation of harvesters, we'd have an opportunity to deal with the meat, and we're getting better as to how to process the meat and make it more attractive, if you will. We also have to develop a distribution network, which is often problematic with our native products, which is already difficult to access. So distribution, access, and of course price, cost. The price of crab became ridiculously out of reach last year, and we had a great difficult time to have access to it. We couldn't afford to buy it anymore, so it's quite a few challenges. Well, we'd like to get to food self-sufficiency and more diversity in our consumption. Perhaps your research colleague using arguments for health and good solid balanced diets, I think the experts have shown us that there are many benefits. So what's missing? Do we just not have enough seal meat to meet the demand, or do we have to convince the public as to the nutritional value and good taste of seal? Well, as for quality, there's an article that's available, The Conversation, it's a magazine. It's based on a research project by our scientists. That's one example, but it's an apex type of animal, so it's at the top of the food chain. The notion of depending on local product instead of a boxed pizza, seal meat is very nutritional, and it offers a lot of opportunities. As for access, I picked up the phone earlier today before coming here. I tried to survey them as to their concerns. And Mr. Zomigno is the only processing plant in our area. He's also a very renowned harvester, and he is having difficulty in accessing the. Well, if we have the time, we'll ask him to come forward as a witness. There are dangers, there's risks in harvesting, but there's also some risks in the processing, the slaughterhouse. And access, even by our harvesters, is very limited. We could, I think, if we can overcome some of these cultural prejudices, have greater access.
For 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. My first question is for Mr. Penny. Mr. Penny, thank you for sharing the information that you did and the clear recommendations. It was very helpful and informative for me. much of what you're saying, we are seeing some themes of things that people are saying, and I wanted to see if you could expand a little bit. You'd spoken about the lack of access to customers and the importance of economic reconciliation, which I think is a really important point for us to consider as we go through this study. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more around what you're hearing as a representative of, and now I can't remember the name, but of the representative of Mi'kmaq commercial fisheries, around the importance of not only the science but the socioeconomic impacts on Canadians and Indigenous people of the current state of sustainable seal harvesting.
Thank you for your question. I speak to customers day in and day out throughout all of Canada and in Asia. And when I'm not speaking to customers, I'm thinking about speaking to customers. And I need to go back to one point because it's just sticking in my head about marketing to Canadians. And this ties back to the perception and social license around sealing. As I also stated, I'm chair of the Canadian Seal Products. And through Canadian Seal Products, in April of 2020, we used Abacus data to do a national survey of Canadians to look at opinions with regards to the sealing industry. Then with the funding we had through the CFSOF program, we spent a year building marketing materials, and then we spent about 6 months marketing this to specific target markets in Montreal as an urban center and in Toronto as another urban center. With the budget we had to really streamline and become very targeted on who we were messaging to. And then about 6 months later, we did another survey. So we had 2 data sources to compare. We saw a growth of 6% in the number of Canadians. We moved from 23% of Canadians are open to buying seal products to 29% of Canadians are open to buying seal products, just by explaining to them about the sustainability of seals, the humane harvesting of seals, but also focusing on the benefits of the actual products, whether it's fur, meat, or oil. With regards to the Indigenous piece to this, for example, the EU has a ban on seal products. They have an Indigenous exemption, which in order to access that exemption, we have to become a recognized body to the EU. And the cost to doing that is incredible. But with regards to the social license, obviously we need to make sure that the Indigenous is the front of this, because at the end of the day, this is culturally important to them. The sharing of the goodness of what seals can bring to people is incredibly important, because the products themselves there's nothing like it in the market. And the salesperson in me, when I have a product that is completely different than any product that exists in the world, it really gets me, revved up to be able to speak to as many customers as I can. The main issue that comes back from customers is the fear, not of the product or sustainability, it's the fear of the animal rights groups. And again, like marketing to some of the responses I've got historically is, does Canadians support this product? And after 2 years of marketing and building marketing materials that focus on experts, we originally started by trying to justify the harvest, but then we realized that's not having the impact we want, because Canada, when it comes to creating and having, I guess I'm trying to think of the word here now, protocols in place or management items to make sure that things are being done properly, humanely. We as Canadians, we look at it in terms of, we know we're going to follow it. We always go over and above what the recommendations are to make sure that we have a sustainable and humane harvest. And Canadians, this is one of the messages we got back. So if we can grow the Canadian market, that's great, but we do need to get market access into countries that currently have it banned. The United States causes us a bit under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. It's hard, pet food companies, we can't get certain, seal meat-based pet products made because they also have customers in the US. And that means that they can't have any sort of seal in their value chain. So I don't know if that answered your question, but some of the stuff that was going on before, I needed to get it out because I think it's important to know that Canadians are real. Like the more we educate them, the more we're going to be able to make seals a Canadian product.
Thank you so much. Normally, I would cut off and go to the next person, but you were providing such helpful information for us to be able to provide clear recommendations to the government moving forward. And my time is up, so I just want to say thank you to Mr. Penny and all the other witnesses, and I hopefully will get a couple more questions in the next round.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. We'll now go to Mr. Calkins and welcome him back to FOPO for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm going to be up a couple of times. I don't know why I just don't go on a 5-minute rant, but I'm not going to do that because the witnesses that are here today are exceptional, and you've all heard my rants before on this. Mr. Knight, it's a pleasure to have you here at the committee. I want to ask you a couple of questions. You've obviously got a career's worth of experience at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Do the marine mammal protection regulations in Canada, are they a barrier or an enabler of ecosystem-based management, in your opinion?
Can you repeat the tail end of your question, please? A barrier or...
Well, you talked about ecosystem-based management.
Yes, right.
And I'm asking you specifically, are marine mammal protection regulations an enabler or a barrier to ecosystem management, in your opinion?
I don't think they're a barrier. I think they're an enabler to demonstrate that we do have the necessary tools in place for effective management.
So you would say then that the marine mammal protection regulations would allow the ability to effectively manage populations of seals?
I would, yes.
The regulations allow for predator control by anybody other than somebody authorized by the government?
I believe there's some new provisions and policies been brought in place since my departure from DFO, so I'm not sure I could totally be confident in giving you the correct answer to that question saying yes, but I don't believe that the regulations are necessarily the impediment in and of themselves. It may be the application of them.
So you talked about the bounty ending on seals. You talked about the explosive growth in the population of seals. We talked about the collapse of the cod stocks and the moratorium back in the early 1990s. As a matter of fact, ironically, I think the marine mammal protection regulations came into force, I think in 1993, of the original version of them, if I have my facts right. I grew up on a farm in Alberta. I'm not a coastal guy in any way, shape, or form, but I love fishing. I also love hunting. And growing up on a farm, if there was a bear or a wolf or a coyote on our farm that posed a threat to the livelihood, as a farmer or as a landowner, we didn't need the permission of the government to do predator control. If you were a forest management, if you're a forestry company with a forest management agreement anywhere in the country and you've got pine beetles threatening your livelihood, you're allowed to take out the beetles without necessarily getting permission from the government in order to do so, because it directly affects the livelihood. Is a sealer allowed to shoot a seal to protect the livelihood of his fishing quota? Or sorry, is a commercial fisherman allowed to shoot a seal to protect the viability of their fishing quota?
The simple answer to your question, I think, is no.
Okay. I think the simple solution to the problem is if we turn that no into a yes. That's just my humble opinion. The reality is, I don't think, and as wonderful as the testimony is today from everybody that's here, and the admiration and respect I have for people who are willing to push a piano up the stairs with a rope to try and create an industry and create demand for seal and seal products in the face of insurmountable pressure on the international stage, even in the domestic parts of even domestically in certain parts of our country. I have nothing but admiration and respect for everybody involved in this, but it's pushing a piano up the stairs with a rope. So we have to, I think, come to the inevitable conclusion that we have to manage, these things are wolves of the sea. They are the wolves of the sea. You said we need to study seal consumption so that we can actually accurately determine. I have no idea why the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, which is responsible for science, wouldn't have a better understanding of that question. And we have to have an ecosystem-based approach. And if we're going to do that, we need to use the tools that are available to us. Hunting is a very valuable part of wildlife management. Fishing is a part of wildlife management. It's a tool that can be used. As a matter of fact, it's not only a tool that can be used to help the Department of Fisheries and Oceans manage the population, but it actually generates revenue, generates income, and creates tax revenue for the Government of Canada. In fact, a hunter in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, no different than a hunter in Alberta, would actually pay the government for the privilege of helping the government. Through the purchases of licenses and tags, we would actually pay the government to help the government manage its wildlife populations. So I think we have a lot of work to do, not only when it comes to the seal industry, but hunting and fishing writ large against the animal rights movement and those who pander to them, whether they do so all the time or even some of the time. But I'm very frustrated by this. I got another question for you. In your experience and knowledge, you're aware that there's a strike on right now in certain parts of the Government of Canada? With the conservation and protection officers or the fisheries officers, or are they on strike right now?
I'm no longer an employee of the department, but my knowledge of that process is that a significant number of the conservation officers would be designated as essential, and therefore that's my past experience. Whether that's currently the case or not, I'm not 100% certain, but I'd suspect that somewhere in the range of 50% of the uniformed officers are designated essential because they're so widely dispersed across Canada. So I suspect probably 50% are working.
Is the fisheries
Thank you, Mr. Calkins. You're gone a little bit over time. Your 5 minutes is 5 minutes and 30 seconds now at this point. Yes. We'll now go to Mr. Hanley for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you very much. I agree with Mr. Calkins' observations on the witnesses. Very informative witnesses today. So thank you very much to all of you. I hope to get to maybe each of you on the theme of increasing marketability, let's say, of seal harvesting and various approaches. So back to Mr. Knight, back to the ecosystem approach. And before going into that, one thing that you mentioned is going on two fronts. You said we need to present better information to kind of prove to Canadians what's going on, and yet we've been here for 30 years. Presumably, we have been accumulating information. Do we not yet have enough of the type of information that is going to convince Canadians? If I could ask you to be fairly short.
Unfortunately, we don't. We have been accumulating information, but it was only about 7 years ago that we were able to determine in the Gulf of St. Lawrence that gray seals were a heavy predator on the cod stocks there. But where the huge herd of harp seals are, we still don't know. We know they consume maybe 1.4 tons per year each, but we don't know what they consume, and there's 7 million of them.
So on an ecosystem approach, what are the, presumably some of that includes managing seals, as you say. Can you be more precise on what that would look like, particularly the managing seals part?
I think if we knew that how much of crab, turbot, cod, other valuable commercial species that seals were eating, we could develop an approach. And it may be like pushing a piano upstairs, or it may be that we will take an effective management strategy that includes the elimination, where possible, of an adequate number of the top predators. The next challenge is to make sure that we effectively use what we remove from the ecosystem to the extent possible, but we cannot not do step 2 because we can't accomplish step 1.
We can apply both steps simultaneously.
Exactly, but we can't fail to act in either case.
And could part of step 2 be starting fairly small scale, evaluating what is being done with a view to perhaps increasing according to the results of the evaluation?
I think it could, and I think if some effective strategy to help reduce the predators in key locations could help. I think other countries have done that more effectively than we have, and I think we need to just stand up and do the right thing.
Et merci beaucoup. Madame Saint-Pierre, vous dites que, je pense que vous avez dit que la...
I think you said that the best way of increasing demand is to serve it in restaurants. Have you witnessed any progress or increased success if you're serving seal in your various dishes? Yes. We have to begin, of course, with raising awareness. Extremely important before we can try to access a greater share of the market or grow the market. We have to ensure we have access. So this is the work of our collective to raise awareness of the consumer. And we have noted a change in attitudes. In my restaurant, sometimes we even give away some shellfish because some people have never eaten some of these. And if they eat them the first time, of course, it helps to overcome prejudices or dislikes and increase the demand. We work collectively, of course, on awareness raising, education, of course, simply by offering them to taste it.
Mr. Penny, I think you said developing a social science research capacity with DFO would be an important part of helping Canadians understand and encourage increasing the market. Am I correct in that? It might have to be a yes or a no.
Yes, that actually came out of the Atlantic Seal Science Task Force report. But I also need to point out, seals are incredibly different. When we're trying to make comparisons to market, a seal has meat, blubber, which gets turned into omega-3 seal oil, fur/leather. So seals have 3 different product lines, and we need to market to each individual product line differently. People who take seal oil capsules could be athletes because it's incredible for maxing their oxygen levels in their blood. It's incredible for inflammation. Seniors. We're currently doing I'm also chair of Canadian Seal Products, so we're also doing a study with Laval University looking at the impact on arthritis. Part of Canadian Seal Products, we have a website called CanadianSealProducts.com. Through the Seals and Sealing Network, we have Proudly Indigenous as well, which sells seal fur products from crafters. There's 3 different product lines that we need to be thinking about.
Sorry, Mr. Penny, I got to interrupt there. We're going over time for Mr. Henley. We'll now go to Madam Debbie Yen for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thanks again, Chair. Madame Lemire, Madame Saint-Pierre, as you say, the gateway to success is through education. I don't think that there's that much effort really to put a positive spin on seal and seal products so that it becomes attractive, sought after by the consumer. It's a new discovery for them, and you seem to be very avid with that process. I think you said eating the bounty of the sea. Can DFO do something to support you, perhaps, I don't know, promotion, have a tasting evening, increase the positive attitude towards the seal products? How can we help an organization such as yours and perhaps see this expanded throughout Canada so that there's a trend actively on its way? Well, I think our youth are the engines of change. We do workshops with our young people, and of course anything to deal with food is almost a family project. But as researchers, we can provide you with data too, health data, as Mr. McKnight has mentioned, and Mr. Penny as well. We mustn't forget the role that culture plays in our food habits. As to expanding it elsewhere in Canada, of course, why not? But it has to be something that goes hand in glove with the people who are on the ground, local people, our native population, our Inuit, our First Nations, our Indigenous people. Whether they're Mi'kmaq or Inuit who have traditionally hunted seal for decades and centuries, it's not an easy meat to process, to cook, but reconciliation through food is not a bad notion. People get together, they eat. Yes, but we need money for that. Well, yes, it is. We do.
Close out the first hour, please, 2.5 minutes or less.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Mr. Knight. Mr. Knight, a previous witness that spoke in this study was talking to us about how one of the number one needs, I believe it was her, I can't remember her name, I'm sorry, but was around the need for professionals in the workforce who understand sealing to be able to pass on the information. And I'm wondering if you're seeing anything around that, around capacity, around training needs, if you could speak to that.
I see some efforts, but in fairness, I see less efforts now than I saw 10 or 20 years ago. And I think there needs to be renewed effort because we see 30 years into the decline of the seal harvest that our problems in trying to manage a number of our fish stocks are continuing. And the efforts that we saw by various levels of government, including the provincial governments, particularly in Quebec and in Newfoundland and Labrador, and by federal government efforts, I sense that they have declined significantly and that there needs to be re-engagement, there needs to be training and support, there needs to be information campaign, and there needs to be collaborative efforts to bring parties together, Indigenous groups, companies, provinces, bring people together to have a sustained effort to help reduce the population to manageable levels.
How about the gear in the boats? What do we need to be able to do a sustainable seal hunt if this were to, if everything changed in an ideal world and we went ahead tomorrow with a sustainable seal hunt, what do we need the government to provide for supports? What needs to be done?
Well, I mentioned earlier on that one of the things that occurred over the years was that the elimination of the large vessels from the harvest, and that's not necessarily a good thing because they're more capable, they're safer platforms to operate, and they're more efficient. Secondly, one of the other things that happened around the mid-1990s was the elimination of the fishing vessel insurance program that provided a reasonable cost level of insurance to fishing vessels. It wasn't funded by government, it was administered by government, but pretty well cost neutral. That was eliminated in the mid-90s, and now the only option is to go to commercial insurers. And as MP Small mentioned, the deductible is up as high as $100,000. So one of the things that causes an ineffective hunt, because of that factor, seal harvesters are using smaller or older, worn-out vessels to harvest seals. They can't use their main vessels because they just can't afford to take the risk. So bringing back something like the fishing vessel insurance program would be a very great benefit, I think, to increasing the capacity to harvest seals.
Thank you for that. And that closes out our first hour of testimony. I want to thank Mr. Knight, Mr. Penny, Madame Lemaire, and Madame Saint-Pierre for their participation here today and sharing their knowledge with the committee on this very important topic. So we'll suspend for a couple of moments while we change out to our next panel. few comments for the benefit of our new witnesses. Please wait until I recognise you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English or French. For those in the room, of course, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. All comments should be addressed through the chair. Finally, a reminder that the use of House-approved headset is mandatory for all virtual participants in parliamentary proceedings. I would now like to welcome our next set of witnesses. Representing Arnelline Resources Limited, we have Mr. Kendall Flood, Chief Executive Officer. Representing the Halifax East Fisheries Association by video conference, we have Mr. Christopher Jones, Director. And representing Mironov, we have Madame Stephanie Petersol.
Yes, I am.
Industrial researcher by video conference. Thank you for taking time to appear today. We have 5 minutes for opening statements. We'll start off with Mr. Jones, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and the opportunity to both present and participate in your session. I'm a retired DFO, Senior Federal Fisheries Policy and Operations Manager, and I've participated in multilateral and bilateral discussions throughout the last 25 to 30 years, and also led delegations in Japan and bilateral herring discussions with the U.S. What I'd like to do quickly is make a brief presentation and then leave with some brief questions. But going back to a point where we see seals off the coast, I'm calling you from Chester, Nova Scotia. And at one time, I was able to take my daughters fishing off the coast. And now I take my granddaughters seal watching because there are no fish. The distinction has not been lost on the preceding generations. My first point I'd like to go into, and I'll read from them and leave them with a question. DFO has indicated they're applying ecosystem-based management approaches to stock assessments. In the abundance of a formal seal stock assessment, concerns exist as to whether DFO has, currently is, or will restrict commercial allocations of traditional fish stocks, cod, capelin, mackerel, etc., to support seal populations. As many of you are aware, many commercial fish stocks are becoming threatened or endangered despite tighter effort controls and increased monitoring enforcement. And in many cases, exceedingly lower allocations are set at the point where many fisheries are either closed or subject to a sentinel fishery status. Yet, many of these stocks are not indicating stability or increasing in stock abundance. As many of us know, there are limited data on seal diets, at least within the Canadian zone, which has led to the surmising that seals consume an insignificant amount of fish. In recent discussions with DFO, it was suggested that seals eat few mackerel, but it's unknown where the study was conducted, whether it was during the mackerel migration or off-season. So the question that leaves with me is, and it's presented to the committee and to DFO, is how can DFO apply an ecosystem-based management without implying the impact of seals on fish stocks? The second point I'd like to raise is the Atlantic Seal Science Task Team provided a series of recommendations in the report of April 2022. Those recommendations included opportunities to increase fishing industry's involvement in seal science projects and ways to better communicate scientific findings to the fishing industry. They also included identifying seal impacts on fish stock rebuilding plans and integrated fisheries management plans were appropriate. And a key recommendation was to initiate a seal summit, which was convened in St. John's in the fall of 2022, and was intended to include collaboration discussions among scientists, commercial harvesters, indigenous groups, and federal, provincial, and territorial representatives. The Baltic Sea is known as a sea basin under ecological stress, and the seal fishery conflict in the Baltic expanded over the whole region, becoming increasingly more difficult to solve. Solutions to mitigate the conflict have not been adequate, and thereby the impact of seals on coastal capture fisheries and aquaculture has been distressing for the fishery sector. Seal populations have been growing fast during the last 35 years, and opportunities for direct management of the populations remain limited. As a result, the regional solutions for mitigating the seal fishery conflict in the Baltic Sea, an interdisciplinary synthesis project called RES-OCO, funded by the Nordic Council of Minister of Fisheries and Cooperation Program, was convened during August 22-23 of 2022. The core aim of this program was to intend to build an interdisciplinary synthesis and up-to-date Nordic knowledge and best practices and set the stage for alternative solutions on how to effectively reconcile seal fishery conflict in the Baltic Sea. Sounds familiar. The project was coordinated by Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and Estonia, and the proceedings were published in January 2023. I've attached, when I sent the information in, the publication and PDF forms for that. Contacts if you need it. The purpose of referencing the Atlantic Seal Science Task Team report and the RESICO report is that they had similar themes, namely a substantive increase in seal populations that are negatively impacting the social and economic viability of coastal communities. To that point, the Baltic Conference proceedings were published and widely distributed, as well as the Atlantic Seal Science Task Team report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. It's gone over the 5-minute mark, and I want to make sure we have time for questions. So anything you didn't get out, hopefully you'll get it out in the questioning round. We'll now go to Madame Pidisseau for 5 minutes or less, please.
Oui. Stéphanie Pietzeau, je travaille chez Marinov, qui est le plus important centre intégré de recherche industrielle spécialisé en technologie des pêches, aquaculture, transformation des bioressources marines au Canada. On s'est intéressé particulièrement c'était sur les pinnipèdes, mais on s'est concentré sur les phoques de l'Atlantique du Nord-Ouest. Donc, ces espèces de phoques gris.
Sorry, we have no translation. Just
I work for Marinov, which is is the interpretation coming through now? Right, we're good.
Interpreting, you have to try and keep up. If you could talk a little slower, it'd make it a lot easier on our interpretation team. So start off again, please.
OK, je vais le faire.
Okay, I'll start from the top. I'm getting an echo here. Go ahead. I work for Marinov, which is the most significant integrated industrial research center specialized in technology of fisheries, including processing, aquaculture, and others. We are concentrating on the North Atlantic seal population, the eastern coast, North Atlantic. That's the zone that we're working in most frequently. So it doesn't matter. We're talking about harp, gray, hooded, bearded, and ringed seals here. But the gray seal, the harp seal, and the common harbor seal are the most frequent populations that we are dealing with. We know that there's a predator-prey, and we know that there are cycles between populations of predators and prey. It's cyclic. We're in a situation actually right now for the harp seals, the gray, and the harbor seals. We anticipate a decline, of course, in some of these species, as we do for most prey species in the environment. Climate change, of course, and ice melt will also have some consequences. There's going to be drowning of young seals. There's going to be some migration of prey species. We're going to see the distribution patterns change. There's going to be mortality due to a lack of resources for certain species in future, and the apparition of some pandemics even among these species these will occur and they will have repercussions on seal populations. So we can't have a fixed picture of what's going on. It's very transient and changing. There are the three species, of course, that are the most interesting for harvesting. The harp seal, 7.4 million apparently. The gray seals and the hooded seal, which are about almost 600,000 in population. But a gray seal would be consuming 1.5 to 2 tons of fish per year, mostly cod. We're having great difficulties in reestablishing the cod fisheries in the lower Gulf in particular. However, we don't have a full picture of that on the diet of these seals, and we don't have a full picture either of the gray seal, for example. Many of the harvesters, in Gaspésie in particular, complain that the gray seal it doesn't concentrate necessarily on fish, but they come right to the cages and they eat lobsters or crab right out of the box. There's another behavior. He's very opportunistic, and they are developing new diets and quite omnivorous. A massive cull or hunt of seals is not necessarily recommended because of the climatic changes which are forthcoming. The hunt would be good if the industry is prepared to process this material. We can do it toe to tail. There's oil, there's pelt, fur, leather, and meat. However, the greatest obstacle right now is public perception. And how do we deal with the residues? These risks are significant and have to be considered before we decide what to do with the seal sector. A harvest should be using best practices and based on a predictive purpose and prudential approach. There will be massive effects of climate change, and this will radically alter the population of both predator and prey species. Human interaction has not always been successful when we try to interfere with Mother Nature. And that's it for now. Thank you.
We'll now go to Mr. Flood for the final opening statement of 5 minutes or less, please.
Good day, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation to come to speak before this committee. I've listened to much of the testimony already provided to this committee and to those who spoke or presented at the SEAL Summit at St. John's last fall. It seems to me most everybody is in agreement that there are too many seals in the water. The current quota for harp is 400,000, and DFO tells us we need to harvest a minimum of 425,000 just to maintain the current population. So the real question would be, if we are currently only harvesting between 5 and 10% of the total allowable catch, how do we get the seals out of the water? Some people call for a cull. Most people are against one, as it could completely collapse the existing seal industry and darken Canada's image so that other businesses and other industries could feel those repercussions. So then it falls on the seal markets. Are the markets there? How big? Can they sustain 400 to 500,000 seals harvested every year? Do we have the infrastructure to handle the volume? The markets are there. There are two very different markets. There's the local and domestic market that have lineups for days for seal flippers at fish trucks and seal oil capsules that are sold in drugstores and grocery stores. But these flippers are secondary to the valuable part of the seal. And the volume of capsules that can be sold domestically, they can never handle a 400,000 seal harvest. So then we look to international markets. And there are large markets in China, Japan, Korea, the GCC countries, just to name a few. There are markets for skins, for oil, for meat, for organs. I've heard the question asked during these committee meetings multiple times, what is the disconnect? What are we missing that we can't move these products into these markets that everybody keeps talking about? For an economic market to thrive, to grow, especially internationally, it needs three major components. It has to have a consistent supply of a consistent quality for a consistent price. A consistent supply we can do. The infrastructure is there, both in the vessels and in the processing plants to handle great volumes of seals. Already there. I can provide you with more detail on that anytime you want. Quality is a big one. The markets demand quality. Our international pharmaceutical customers tell us our oil, naturally, needs to be pharmaceutical grade. And in the case of China, encapsulated, bottled, and with the legal documentation to export there. If we're to sell seal meat on the global market, then we need to treat it like we do crab or salmon. The meat needs to be processed to value add it. Again, please feel free to ask me to give you more detail on that. Seal fur. It's long been the backbone of the seal industry. Its fur has been sought out and sold across the world. And as a previous guest to this committee, Merv Wiseman, pointed out, the fur industry as a whole has suffered as of late. But the fur is not the only viable part of the skin. There is currently a sizable demand for seal leather. It has a very attractive, unique pattern, but also has the second strongest tensile strength of any leather behind only wallaby. If the supply is there and the quality is there, in order to get buyers to build their own sales networks, there has to be a consistent price. And that's largely what happened in the early 2000s, when over 300,000 seals were harvested every year and then fell to where they are now. The prices exploded and the market collapsed. It is imperative that everybody in the industry work together, which includes processors, harvesters, and government. I can provide examples on some of this collaboration has already begun. Full utilization is another point that's repeated and questioned during these meetings. Perhaps increased utilization is a better way to put it, but the answer is yes. Far more of the seal can be utilized than just the fur. Exactly what and how largely depends on the age of the seal. Now, the last question should be, how can the Government of Canada help? If we're going to continue to have these meetings to discuss what to do with the seal industry, then let's create a small strategic trade group, global affairs DFO processors, small and precise. The government can also fund and promote clinical trials on the benefits of seal oil. The vast majority of current omega-3 studies, all in fish oils. We have ideas that we've spoken to members of DFO with on how processors and harvesters can collaborate with DFO to more efficiently collect data, which will give a broader picture of what is happening, and with an eye to climate change, to stay ahead of what will happen. Thanks for listening. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you for that. Right on time. We'll go to our questions now. For the first round, we'll go to Mr. Small for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming out today. My first question is to Mr. Flood. The sealing industry has expressed concerns about activists and NGOs being able to gain too much access to the harvest. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that activists can get into where the harvest is taking place too readily?
I think nowadays everybody recognizes the need to have a workplace where you're not constantly harassed. And that's the same for sealers, especially in such a dangerous environment. This is not sitting in an office. They're out on the ice. Imagine slipping in the pavement in a parking lot. Now you're working on ice with 8-inch knives, with machines moving around, with rifles. And if you're distracted by a drone or a helicopter that's literally there to harass you, it's quite dangerous. And these guys are a long way from home. So from talking to the concerns of the harvesters, they should be 25, 30 kilometers away. Otherwise, it's literally life and death.
So you think there should be an exclusion zone of a much better defined and a larger exclusion zone that exists?
I would say at least 25, 30 kilometers away.
Okay. Now, I heard you mention your experience with other agencies, government agencies, global affairs and trade and CFIA and whatnot. What's been your experience with the level of support for the sealing industry from government departments other than DFO?
Federally, DFO, as I know you said other than, DFO has been fantastic working with from start to finish. CFI have been fantastic to work with. They've helped us tremendously. We are 9 years in the making, but we're brand new to the end, to getting going, so CFI have been extremely helpful. Our headaches have been honestly more on a provincial level.
Okay, so can you explain some of the red tape that your groups had to deal with in the developing of your new seal processing venture?
It would take longer to this meeting to get through all of it, but the one that is the most painful and is happening at this exact second, as of right now, there's been just over 38,000 beater seals landed. And the existing processor, they only asked for about 35,000. They ended up taking 38. Then they had to call the hunt off, have the boats come home half empty, some of them not go out at all. Meanwhile, I have a customer in Canada that wants to buy 10,000 beater skins, but I'm not allowed to sell them. The provincial government has legislated a monopoly to one company, and the rest of us have to throw ours in the landfill or don't collect them at all. So I have 2 boats in the water right now that are bringing me in adult seals, and the 10,000 beater seals are going to stay at sea.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Flood. I've got a question, Mr. Chair. I've got a question for Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, based on your vast fisheries management experience and working with DFO, has DFO been overly cautious or protective in its approach to the threats of sanctions against our seafood exports as it relates to the Marine Mammal Protection Act?
The feedback that I've received from my contacts in the industry in both provinces and throughout Atlantic Canada has been with the introduction of the nuisance seal policy and also the a recent response to product being put in processing for bait products. It would appear that they have been very cautious, and we're not sure their anecdotal references of how it may impact trade with the U.S. We're looking for if there were formal communications from the U.S. on that rather than interpretive ones. We haven't seen it.
So I know that Baitmasters from PEI were attempting to use some seal byproducts for lobster bait. So do you think that the concerns are unfounded? Do you think that government officials are reacting to threats from animal rights activists, and they're not basing their decisions on fact?
To answer that, I would say that I'm now outside of government, but I would say that based on the lack of consultation with the fishing industry before the introduction of those policies suggests the department is being cautious as to why. I'm not sure I can allude to that and give you any kind of a direct response. I expect that overall the combination of ENGOs and also their reticence to want to enact any response from the U.S. But what we're seeing is that we haven't seen consultations with the industry, particularly on the nuisance seal policy. We haven't seen any tangible evidence from in discussions or dialogue or communications with the U.S.
Thank you, Mr. Small. We'll now go to Mr. Kellaway for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm handing off my question to Mr. Hardy. Okay, there you go. I don't get that look of disappointment off you.
I know.
There. Okay.
Sorry.
So Mr. Jones, maybe you're in about the best position to answer this one. It's a mystery that has confounded this committee for a few years after we were chatting with a chap from Norway, and we asked him about the seal problem that they used to have there. And he kind of smiled a mysterious little smile, and he said, well, they just went away. Do you know what happened to make them go away in Norway?
Well, I think in the Scandinavian countries, they have a little different philosophy in their approach on ecosystem management. And I think yet they're one of the most substantial exporters of fish products to the U.S. I would say the combined group probably rival what Canada's exports are. And they're being very coy. I think, as I mentioned earlier, in the Baltic Sea, they're having the same problem we're experiencing. And I think Norway realized that some years ago and put in a program where they started to balance the ecosystems.
Okay, that's a little cryptic. By balancing the ecosystem, that kind of sounds like we're taking some seals out. How did they do it? Do we know?
I think my understanding is that they first went about determining the seal population. They had methodologies to determine the population, and they were able to determine how, and they do have a limited seal hunt, how they would best balance the combination of predator and prey between seals and their fish stocks. And as you know, they have some of the most substantial cod and haddock stocks in the world at this point, whereas one time we did. So I think they're cautious in both wanting to tell us what they've done, but if you look at the evidence, it's clear that they've done this gradually over a long period of time. And they have, as I mentioned earlier, their philosophy is my experience of having been there and talked to some of these people, one of recognition of balance. And it goes back to determining the population dynamics and the methodologies to determine how many seals they actually have. And that goes back to my point earlier, where if there's, until Canada has a management plan in terms of determining the number of seals there are and using established methodologies that the Scandinavians have developed, I think that will go a long way in legitimizing the any hunting or sealing activities that we can rely on, that there's an actual substantive plan based on fact.
Mr. Jones, can you tell us that whatever Norway didn't seem to run afoul of the U.S. Marine Mammal Protection Act?
For some reason or other, it hasn't. You might recall that not only does Norway harvest seals, but they also have a whale hunt. And how that isn't impacted by U.S. policy and acts is something I expect the U.S. worked out with Norway, either on a bilateral or the U.S. has an understanding that if there is a proper stock status established based on methodologies, then it meets a standard by which they would enable imports of fish products, notwithstanding a seal and whale hunt.
We talk about trying to rationalize or justify reducing the number of seals through hunting them. And as Mr. Calkins noted, it's like pushing a piano upstairs with a rope. to get that justification in place, and it's mainly because of A, public perception, and B, the threat from the United States that they could cut off the importation of other seafood products that we definitely want to sell them. So I guess the other question then is, if the idea is to reduce the number of seals out there, are there other ways? Maybe Madam Pediso could comment. Is there birth control? Could we, shoot a dart full of something into them and make it so there are no more little seals? Are there predators that could be introduced, although that's never worked out well for us? Maybe we'll let you answer that.
Ça a été fait pour d'autres populations, par le passé, d'introduire des prédateurs et ça a jamais.
Well, the idea of introducing predators is never a very good idea. Past experience in introducing other species is not necessarily successful. However, there's also been sterilization attempts in the past. However, the human race is in a shortage position on protein. So it would be ridiculous to reduce the population and not add value. It would be a net loss for us. To reduce the population size, you must at least take advantage of the meat, and not only the meat, but everything else, the side products, the secondary products. The opportunity is there to have this resource, to use this resource, but it would take a lot to sterilize a species. I think that would be pure waste of energy and money, and that could be used elsewhere. You could use it to feed people, to increase our protein ranking, and this is our position. We would favor a hunt rather than financial losses in sterilizing a species.
Over time, we'll now go to Madame Debienne for 6 minutes or less, please.
Yes, Madame Piedzo, carry on, please. I'd like to hear your answer. Well, thank you. The introduction of a predator or another factor is not to be recommended. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, we are in a cycle currently where the population between predator and prey, when there's a decline in the prey, well, months later, a year later, we see a diminution of the population of the predators. The stakes are the same for a number of prey predator species in any case. The modeling of the information would be very, very important. Right now it's quite provisional. We are not clear as to where the populations will be. We're working in Gaspésie right now when we're seeing changes in temperature, in water temperature, in various other climate, and we're worried about lobster species as well. It's limp, it's mushy, it doesn't have the same hard shell. Each species will react specifically to these changes, and these changes are ongoing. They will have an impact on all fisheries, crustaceans, shellfish, seals as well, pinnipeds, for all species that we will see in the Gulf. And if we don't have a predictive model for that, we're going to end up with a surprising result, unexpected result for all species, all fisheries. Does DFO have a major role to play, a predominant role in trying to develop these predictive models? Well, consultation, they have to organize with all the stakeholders, all those who are interested in that matter, whether it be academia, industry, researchers, anybody who's working on a predictive model. And of course, it has to be across the board, all provinces, the industry. The harvesters see this. They know they're picking these weak, fragile lobsters. they see the state of health of these crab and snow crab and lobster. We have to have, what we have is digital information now. We have traceability that could be perfected. And this would give you all sorts of information and data, digitally accumulated. We have a lot of information. We need more information, though, on the traceability of seafood and seafood products. And the tools. So we would have the needs, we do have the tools, in fact, to react and respond. Yes, but sometimes it might take 10 years to see what the climate changes are going to be. But 10 years is too much time, because by that time the changes are irreversible. And the species have evolved and changed and adapted. Well, wonder if DFO is actually listening out there, but we're listening to you, and we'll make those recommendations soon. What would those recommendations be for the time being, for today? Well, if we could support financially the industry's projects, digitization, adapting to the technology, improving processes, and communications, of course, within the industry to speed up and streamline the systems so that traceability for all seafood products occur before it's too late. And of course that means a bit more money, or a lot more money. Well, not only, but the better communications first of all. So it's that missing link, it's the between the industry and the individuals. Yes, among and between departments, for example, and interaction. Do you feel that this is causing obstacles to your research work? Of course, and we always have on the back burner what's the American reaction going to be? Well, the Fisheries and Resource Department, Quebec, is very, very concerned with the international position, and they are influenced by these international positions. It's sort of a closed loop. We've recently learned that in Norway, you were talking about Norway or Sweden just a while ago, they're looking at how they're going to change their entire norms for standards for whales, for example. We are constantly concerned with the health of the whale population and certain species here in Canada, but everyone seems to be in the same boat. The regulations are put into place. It's not so much the regulations, but it's sort of inherent conflict with regulations from various orders of government or jurisdictions, where there becomes inconsistencies. And the harvesters have to deal with that. The industry has to deal with that. Various orders of government, various jurisdictions, different standards for certification, for example. I know you're going to stop me, Madam, Mr. Chairman.
Aaron, now for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to our witnesses who are here. My first question is for Mr. Flood. Mr. Flood, I was thinking about when you were talking about the local and domestic market that had lineups for days for seal flippers at fish trucks. I was thinking about how my grandparents had a restaurant. I won't go on too long because I want to make sure I get good questions, but they had a restaurant called Mr. B's when I was a kid, and they sold specialty Newfoundland dishes, and one of their most popular dishes was seal flipper pie. So I was, anyways, just wanted to acknowledge that. You had talked about in your opening statement about the vessels, processing plants, and the infrastructure being there, and I'm wondering if you can expand on that.
A lot to go, so I'll talk quickly, see what I can do. The three processors that are there right now can very easily between them handle 400,000 seals. in the heyday back in the early 2000s, they were doing over 300,000 regularly with space to spare. It's easy to keep going. In terms of the harvesters, they go out in the boats, inshore harvesters and speedboats up to 40-foot and then 60-foot longliners. They're no longer allowed to use any boats larger than a 65-footer. DFO, it was a DFO regulation put in. The question was why. DFO regulation put in at the height when everybody's harvesting 300,000 seals. They wanted to make sure that there was enough seals for the inshore harvesters to get as well, and not just for the people who had all the money for a big boat. That was the reasoning. But on a 65-footer, so there's three main age groups of seals that you could get. You get the beaters, which are the young ones. They're the ones you use in the garment industry, and that's 99% of all the seals, more than that. You can get, on a 65-footer, you can get up to 5,000 beaters. And by that, they don't take the entire seal. They skin the seal on the ice, and they take the skin with the fat and some flippers for flipper pie. Then the next stage is the 1 to 2 year olds, which are a Polymer seal. And you can fit approximately 2,500 of those on a boat. Polymer seal, they have very good back straps. That's like a loin runs down the back. There's no fat, no bone. It's pure meat, not even a grain like a steak. That's where you're getting your best. If you're going to sell to a restaurant, that's the roast you want to sell. On a beater, it's too small. It's not economically viable for the fishermen to take out. And on that one, on a beater, you're getting about 10 kilos of fat per seal. On a Polymer, let's say 25. Then you go to the adult seals. Now, a big adult seal can have 50 kilos of fat and a much larger backstrap. The backstraps will range anywhere from 2.5 to 5 kilos. And again, huge meat. If not quite as tender as a Polymer for the restaurant, but if you were going to make jerky en masse, for instance, or if you were going to make stews or pet food, that's the one that you want to go to, and that's the one that's most economically viable for a fisherman. So if he was going to take an adult seal off the ice for full utilization, we'll say, they'll take the pelt with the large fat, then they'll cut off the back straps. They can also harvest. We have markets for hearts. We have markets for kidneys. Of course, the penises are always viable, and from the adult seals. You can get 800 to 1,000 adult harp seals on a boat. Again, the numbers all start changing if you start talking hood seals, which are 2 and 3 times the size, or gray seals, which are a couple times the size as well. How they bring these in, again, they cut them, shoot them, skin them. They hook the holes where the flippers are cut off on the pelts. They run a rope through. You get 5 or 6 of these. They pull it in with their crab hauler, bring it up with a boom, bring it down. They have all the infrastructure they need. If the weather and the ice are allowing, a single sealer can make 6 trips. If you're talking adults to Polymer, to beater, they can start in December, and they can go all the way into May and June. And so they can easily make 6 trips each, weather and ice permitting. And that's where climate change makes a big difference. And this year in particular, the ice was completely unpredictable. There'd be no ice coming in, then it would come in heavy. The wind would all of a sudden push it against shore, break it up, it'd disappear, it'd come back, and it's very difficult. Right now, one of our sealers just had to stop sealing, go all the way up to Bonavista to avoid the ice that was being blown towards him, so his 65-footer wouldn't get crushed. And he has to land in Bonavista, and we have to truck it up to the plant in Fleur-de-Lis because the ice is blocking his way that he can't make it to our plant. So it's very weather and ice dependent.
I only have 30 seconds left, but perhaps you can expand a little bit more on the importance of value added for the global market.
Okay, value added. If you take rough chunks of meat cut off and you throw it in a box, it looks terrible, it's not going to sell. If you take Polymer ribs and you vacuum pack them and put them in a box, the same way you see your pork ribs in the grocery store, everybody wants them. And that goes for every single part of it. forget trying to sell a great big roast when you can turn that into high quality jerky. It's all about the secondary processing. That's where the money is. That's where the desire is.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Barron. We've got pretty well 7 minutes left, I guess, so we'll go to Mr. Calkins for 5 minutes or less. You're next on the list.
I'll try and be as judicious as I can so others can talk. I just want to talk about, Mr. Flood, could you clarify this monopoly issue, this provincial monopoly thing? Could you give some clarification? I'm not following.
I'll try to make this as fast as possible, which means I skip some details. There were in 2006, there were 3 existing processors. Combined, they were doing over 300,000 seals a year. 2 of the processors were sending their skins abroad to be tanned. So in 2006, a law was passed that all skins leaving Newfoundland had to be tanned first. And that's to keep jobs in Newfoundland, no problem. And they did that. Shortly thereafter, when it collapsed, there was only 1 processor. That law hasn't changed. Then the government enacted another law that said you weren't allowed to use brine in curing seals, the primary step to tanning a seal, except that 1 processor, which they grandfathered in. So when the new processors came along, they're not allowed. So in our case, we have 10,000 seals that we could sell the beater seals tomorrow. We're not allowed to harvest them. The skins that we're getting from the adults that are being brought to shore as we speak, we can sell those for leather. We're not allowed. We're not allowed to tan them. We're not allowed to sell them. I have customers in Canada. We have customers abroad. We are not allowed to sell them. One of the other processors that is currently going, they started to tan because they had customers. Their whole reason for starting was to sell skins. After they started, they were told they weren't allowed to, and they're struggling to survive because they're not allowed to sell skins.
You missed some details there. Okay.
I missed a lot of details.
No, well, if you want to follow up with this, I think this committee would actually like to know that. So, in the context of the way we talk to each other these days, I want to put it on the record that cod lives matter. And how many excess seals are there actually on the East Coast? Compared to historical numbers. I've heard that historical numbers used to be 2 million and now there's 7 million. I think we're just talking about the harp seals. Like, how many actual excess, and the quotas that have been allocated over time, whether they've been filled or not, in my opinion, don't seem to be enough to actually create or move us back into some semblance of balance, regardless of whether we're able to even get to the quota. What would the quota need to be in order to, in a reasonable time frame, get back to historical levels of seals?
No, I mean, the quota hasn't changed in many, many years. And DFO have been perfectly open that they'll move the quota. If we hit 4,000, they'll move it to 5 to 6. There's no point in moving it if we're taking out 25 or 30,000 seals a year. DFO said just to maintain the population now is 425 to 450,000. To start bringing it down, the number's about 600,000. There's no point moving a quota if we don't take them out. And that's the processors. We have to take it out. There's no question on that. To get that out of the water, we have to focus on quality. We need secondary processing. Yes, there are market issues. There is a huge demand in these countries. Sometimes there's the typical red tape. Sometimes it's a lot harder. Is there places where government can help on red tape? Absolutely, without question. Not just the U.S., everywhere. You guys missed a huge opportunity on Monday when you had Romy was here. Romy herself, she didn't get asked any questions. She's been working for years, literally on doing the paperwork on getting seal products into China. And the red tape and stuff that she's been hit with through the Seals and Sealing Network. And we have all the processors in Newfoundland, Total Ocean, we're all working in that group and trying to get things. Romy is probably the biggest expert on that. So I highly recommend you bring her back or at least reach out for information. She's been in this industry for years and she knows far more about that than I can speak on.
Thank you. My last question is for Madame Piteau. There are farmers in Thailand right now that are growing crickets for human consumption protein with tremendous success. And how would you advise this committee? Because it seems odd to me that we can convince human beings to eat crickets, but we can't convince human beings to eat seals. So what are we missing, and what do we need to do to correct this bizarre scenario?
I don't want to eat crickets. I mean, it's a question of balance. I mean, it has been a question of management. It's not that easy. It's ecosystem management, and it's not that simple. One thing is it's easier to manage terrestrial animals than marine animals, first of all, because in marine management, everything is moving more than in terrestrial management first. And the thing is that, as I said just earlier, we are entering a period where everything will move because of climate change, and we observe already a lot of change. So it's, I mean, 10 years ago, it would have been easier to take decision like that. And it would have been easier to take a decision to manage the population of seals 10 years ago. But now it's more delicate. Like, it would have been easier to do something 10 years ago. It's more touchy to do something like today, because we know that we are at a point where the harbor seal, as an example, is at the top of the predatory curve. And we know that the fishes are getting down. So we are at the right step where there is a gap and the population is supposed to get down. So the thing is that now we have to evaluate what is the risk to make an important pressure on the harbor seal or on the harbor seal, and knowing that there are changes that are coming on, while we were supposed to maybe do something 10 years ago to manage the population. J'ai switché à l'anglais. Donc, c'est un peu...
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Calkins. I'm so glad you were so generous with your 5 minutes. I promised Mr. Morrissey one question before we end at 5:30, so Mr. Morrissey, go ahead quickly, please.
Are those vessel restrictions still in place, which seem to be counterproductive? And secondly, you're telling me we have to start by getting our own house in order, provincially and federally, because a lot of the frustration you expected, is that because of provincial regulations on the tanning and allowing things to go?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And I don't mind throwing them under the boat either. I sat down with the provincial fisheries minister and said I could pay the sealers an extra $25, $30 a skin, or I could throw the skins into the landfill. I said it's an extra like $250,000 each sealer, or I could throw them in the landfill. And his response was I could give them to the other processor. And I think that's just insane. He's been refusing to discuss it. I brought it up to him multiple times.
Okay, thank you to our witnesses who have shared their knowledge with us this afternoon. I again want to thank Mr. Calkins for coming back to FOPO and Mr. Commish for being such a valued member for today's participation. So on Monday we'll continue with our study as we were today, and meeting adjourned.